Hilton, thank you very much for joining me. How have you been, boy?
I've been fine, John. Nice meeting in the flesh, as it were. First time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Same. Right. Loads and loads to get into. There's a lot of stories you have to tell from your years through the RUC. You might start us off like what was it like growing up through this mad decade, as I imagine it must have been up there, of the 70s, and then what would make a person who lived through that want to join the police force?
Well, John, I was born in Northern Rhodesia, um, and my mother and dad split up in 1964. I was born in 1960, so we came back to Northern Ireland to be with my mum's family, and we lived in a place called Newton, which is outside Belfast. So I grew up with a brother and a sister in a single parent home. Not much money, and but my mum did her best for us. We went to the school. I went to a grammar school, but I wasn't very much inclined in the books, and loved my sport. And the troubles never really affected me because all I cared about was getting outside and playing as a child, early teens. And then I sort of got wrapped up in the church youth club. And it was the first time then that the trouble started to shake me by the back of the neck. I began to see police officers in church with nice cars. Uh, and the thing I noticed about them was, well, they had nice cars. They're always well turned out. They're always a wee bit, not aloof. I thought it was aloof. They're always a wee bit, kept themselves back. Nice, but reserved. Um, and that's when I first noticed the police. And then the troubles slowly, as you get older, start to seep in. And a very good friend of mine's father was murdered by mistake by the IRA, a guy called Charlie Johnson. And his brother had been in the part time force, and Charlie Johnson was in Hamilton travel agency business in Belfast. He was shot going to work this day, and I attended funeral just outside Belfast. And that was the first time that the troubles really hit home with me. Um, at 17, I joined the civil service, clerical assistant. Um, Watched the world go by me, pensions branch dormant. Moved across to Snugville Street Social Security office, became a visiting officer as a clerk. And my take home pay, now this is the crux of it, was 300 odd quid a month. And I was going visiting up and down the Shankle Road, lower, middle, and upper, handing out grants, supplementary benefit grants.
And handing out what?
Supplementary benefit grants to the folks that couldn't afford cookers, floor covering, teas, folks with no money. Loved the job, just no money left at the end of the month. And there was a girl I worked with whose hobby was in the police. And this day we're talking about wages and stuff like that there. And how much is he earn? £1,000 a month. I went, what? And I was on £300 a month. What does he do? What does he do? Just sits in the back of Land Rover. I went, what? And a little thought struck my mind. And the manager of the sub Ben office, the guy called Jimmy Hayburn, he'd done over 30 years in the civil service, and his take home pay was £1,000 a month. And I thought to myself, how can I improve my life? I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was risky, but there was something in me. I always wanted to be a policeman as well, because they were in my neck of the woods where I lived. Police officer was respected, a respectable member of the community. So this day, I probably was about 21, 22, walked up to police headquarters, purple corduroy trousers, purple moon boots, hair down on my shoulders, big iron jumper, and says, have you got an application form to join the RUC? And the guy at the desk said, do you have a degree, son? I says, no, I don't. He says, here's one for the full-time reserve. He handed me an application form full-time reserve. I said, give me one for the regulars. And off I went. And because I only had 3 O levels to my name, I had to sit an exam. And on the 16th of July, 1983, Castlereagh Police Station, the rain was bucketing down outside. I sat an exam to join, and I was lucky enough to get in.
Could I ask
Get to the interview stage and get past the recruitment sergeant, who in those days would come out to your home and get a vibe of what the family was like, and what, no hate or hate this and hate that on the walls, and they were very thorough in those days within the recruitment process.
Very good. Okay, so did you like if someone came up to you maybe from a different community and said, look, this group that you're joining, the RUC, they're actually like an oppressive force who they attack civil rights marches. Sometimes they don't prevent others from attacking them. They let them. They're actually a force that works like to oppress the Catholic community, and they're not on a lot of the people's side. Would that have been something that you would have like argued with someone if they said that to you, or would you kind of understand?
John, it just didn't happen. From the community I was from, which you maybe loosely described as middle class, it wouldn't happen, because still, I suppose that in those days there was still segregation, and you weren't even aware of it. I went to a Protestant school, never mixed with Catholics. I had no gripe against Catholics. There was a Catholic school down the Rain Mill Road. I went down to Dill Grammar School just above it. And there was no nastiness between either school, but you just never mixed with anybody to enter into those discussions, and especially not at the age of 20, 21, 22, or 23. Just wouldn't have happened, John.
So would you have been like, would you have at least known what they were referring to if someone said some gave these examples of like, see, not protecting marches and stuff?
You're talking about the civil rights marches, John? Yeah,
and
that sort of argument, I honestly wouldn't have been too aware of those at 21, 22, 23. But I can also understand now, in hindsight, the huge changes that were going on in the province, and perhaps these things had to happen. 2 steps back and 1 step forward. Who knows? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it had no bearing on why I wanted to be a police officer. I fancied the lifestyle improvement, but I also wanted to make a difference. I thought my personality could make a difference within the uniform. So I got to that stage of the interview process, and I didn't think I'd got through the interview process, because I was asked a question which I thought I'd really Daffy ducked up. I don't know whether you have any knowledge of the Cecil Parkinson affair, where he was the darling of the Tory party, and he had an affair, an illegitimate child. And I was asked during my interview, what did I think of that? And I said, well, as long as he can do his job, why blah, blah, blah. And the guy at the other side of the desk, I think it was Chief Inspector, said, but he was in a position of trust. And I could just feel my career in the police sliding down the tubes. But I said to him after, I said, I accept your point, but I said, still hold on to mine, providing he can do his job, why not? I was lucky enough to get it.
Okay, so again, but like kind of back to that question, would you have been aware that you were joining a group that I think Catholics were like 40% around about, like that you were joining a group that like not obviously not all 40%, but like a big chunk of the Catholic community would have seen you as like not a force for good, and not the law enforcement. Were you aware that that sentiment like strongly existed amongst Catholics?
No, I wasn't aware. Years later, you become aware of these things because you read about them and folks reminisce about them. but at 22, 23, an East Belfast or South Belfast boy, single parent family, that wasn't even on my radar. My radar was romance, music, sports, and I was prepared to do my bit, and try to do a good job as a police officer.
Was there any degree of wanting to lock horns with the IRA or clash with paramilitaries, or kind of prevent them from taking life or setting off bombs? So what was that kind of in your
No. No. What you're saying within my purview of why I wanted to join the police? Definitely not. But I would suggest most of the guys I worked with were in the same mode. As a matter of fact, if you wish, we can go a wee bit further forward. And a Catholic guy I met in the depot, he was from Derry, and
this is another RUC recruit, yeah?
Yeah, well, when I got accepted for the RUC, you had to go to the depot, and I started on the 11th of December, 1983. It was a Sunday, the rain was pouring down, and the first thing you did was they showed you into this hall, desks, like exam desks. Each desk had a cardboard number on it. Sit wherever you want, boys. You're sitting there. I was sitting in a wee suit, thinking I was great, nervous as hell. And next thing, going to show you a video, and played the video. Nobody spoke. Nobody warned us. Nobody gave us any. And it was one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen in my life. It was about atrocities, live footage of atrocities. And we sat and watched this for about maybe 10 minutes. And at the end of it, the guy said, right, chaps, if that's not for you, any of you guys, if that's not for you, feel free now to get up. Now, this was at the stage of your very first day in the job. You hadn't quite signed the dotted line. That was going to come after this video. And it was like absolutely horrific. It was a cold slap in the face. This is what you might have to contend with. This might be you. This might be somebody of your family. This might be. And around our squad was about 52. It was K squad. And about 5 people got up and left at that point.
I wouldn't have expected anyone to like go through the exams and do all that and then say no. Okay, well.
Yep. Well, so for those of us that remained, we signed the dotted line. Then signed up for all the policies, which we've been paying for all our service, and we're allocated a dorm for the first half of the training. And that's when I met with a Catholic guy. And he stayed for 2 weeks. He was from Derry, and I can't remember his name. Lovely fella. And he was really, really scared at all times. Nerves were shot. Because he feared what would happen if any of his community found out that he had joined the police. And there's a resonance there with any Catholics that were in the RUC. But for me, and in my experience, the guys that were in the force, any Catholics who were in the force, were revered because their risk was several notches higher than ours. But after 2 weeks, back to a Catholic then colleague, he just didn't come back. And I had 100% sympathy for his reasons for not coming back. But Catholics for me within the art, and it's funny as well, at the end of my service, my very last parade that I did in uniform in Lower East Belfast, walking past the Short Strand, I was in a crew of 5 people in a Land Rover. And my very last parade in the job, I was the only Protestant in the Land Rover. And had somebody said to me, do you know you're the only Protestant in this Land Rover? Because we brought it up and we all had a laugh about it. There was absolutely no difference whether you were Protestant or Catholic, as there was when I joined the job all those years back, and I know maybe, John, you find that hard to believe, but when you were in the job, you were all in it together, full stop. And the Catholics that I met and are still friends with now, you held them even dearer because of that extra level of risk they were taking.
Yeah, I've heard that same thing from Colin Breen and Stephen White,
Yeah.
who I've interviewed. Do you think yeah, okay, so like there wasn't any, like, I mean, considering there was Catholic officers there, would like the majority, the Protestant officers, would some of them have sometimes like been speaking about religion and maybe in like a sectarian way? I've heard that did most certainly happen amongst RC.
Well, just recently I went and watched a play in Belfast called Stuck in the Middle with You, and its opening scene was a Protestant police officer and a Catholic police officer who were thrown together to do a security patrol, and they were having an argument, and they were blah blah, and it was all about the Protestant police officer searching the Catholic police officer's house many years previously in the Divis area, and they were squaring up with each other. And at halftime during the parade, I said to my wife, I said, the play, I said, I'm leaving because that's not the way it happened. It might have happened with somebody else, but it never happened in my service. The two officers were squared up over religion. And it didn't sit well with me because I knew the camaraderie we had. Your religion didn't matter. As far as I was concerned, never mattered, and I never see it making it. I'd never see it come to play my service.
Fair enough. Like I think the ratio was like around 90-10.
Yeah.
Was,
yeah.
Was that about?
Yeah, easily.
Oh yeah. So okay, fair enough. You didn't see. Okay. On a similar-ish note on I guess the like unethical or kind of dishonest behavior. Throughout your time, we'll talk about your time. There's plenty to talk about. But during your time, did you come across any officers, even just kind of hearing about them, ones like colluding or going worse, like actually actively helping with loyalist murders? There's been officers in the past who like ferried guns to the to killers, who guided them through roadblocks, who made sure they didn't get in trouble after they did get arrested. For any did you hear any rumblings or anyone you know?
No. And I thought long and hard about that question, because I was stationed in Willowfield and MOUNTPOTTINGER, which is East Belfast, and Castlereagh, the holding centre in the RUC station was just above us. And I knew loads of detectives, both MOUNTPOTTINGER and Willowfield. And at the time, the news were, they're beating up people and they're forcing confessions and they're doing this, that, and the other. I heard that from the media. I never heard it from any of the guys that were detectives who I played golf with, who were regularly going to Castlereagh to interview loyalists and nationalists regarding terrorist issues. And I never heard any of them saying, well, something not nice happened the other day or blah blah. And I know that the place was videoed as well. I had cameras on the place in the later years. But again, John, I cannot tell you that it didn't happen either. And I'm not going to live in Cloud Cuckoo Land and say 100%, because I wasn't there. But I never heard anybody, any CID colleagues, mention anything untoward going on in Castlereagh.
Did given that, like, for example, like John Weir, that case had been like kind of found out and arrested by a couple of years, but by the time you joined up, was there ever like kind of warning stories given to you by your higher ups, as in like you might if at some stage you might be tempted to think that you're getting back at the IRA by by helping out some other group. Don't do this, or use, or look at
No,
where, look what happened. Was
never.
even mentions in terms
No,
of like warning stories?
no. Because, John, basically, I was a police officer. I was a plod on the ground. The war against the IRA, IPLO, INLA, UDA, UVF, UFF for that matter. Um, it was going on while I was doing police work, while I was attending road traffic accidents, assaults, disorderly behaviours, domestic issues, cats up trees, helping little old ladies across the road. Every day you went in, every day you went in for duty, you got paraded by your sergeant. You had areas out of bounds, read to you, stolen, lost cars, people of note to keep an eye out of. You recorded that in your notebook, and then you went out and answered your calls and did your files and went to court. All the time you are trying to keep an eye over your shoulder because death was waiting in the wings all the time for police officers, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And but no, I didn't. It never even entered my mind.
Okay, so your first, you said your first posting was in Cookstown,
Yeah.
is in the East Tyrone area. I just did probably one of my favorite episodes to record was with Jonathan Trigg, who briefly served there himself as a British soldier. But he wrote a book kind of detailing the history throughout the conflict of the East Tyrone Brigade. Very active. They were able to kind of pull off types of operations that others didn't. Big kind of set piece stuff. They would travel a lot. They had this kind of vision of like no-go zones where they would essentially disable RUC stations and make the area kind of unpoliceable, that sort of thing. Yeah, tell me just what it was like being posted in such a hot area at the time. It's the start in 80, at the end of 83, you said.
Yeah, so I've just passed out from the depot, basically not really knowing my ass from my elbow. Belfast boy, posted to Cookstown, 140 square miles of policing area. Cookstown itself, then, maybe not now, I don't know, maybe 60-40, prod to Catholic. Everybody keeps their head down. I arrived at Cookstown Station not long after a guy who had a very, very big impact in my service was murdered, and we never met. There was a guy called Colin Carson, and he was full-time reserve in Cookstown. Married man in his 30s, couple of kids, and he was trying very hard to get into the regular police. And I thought always for years that I was the next guy into Cookstown after he was murdered. And Colin was doing files this day in Cookstown because he wanted to get in the regulars. And the sergeant asked him, would he mind doing a relief at the Sanger, which is where he normally was when he wasn't out trying to do files and stuff like that there. So Colin was doing the DPP file. No problem, skipper. Out he goes into the Sanger. And time and destiny arrived at the wrong time for Colin because Dominic McGlinchey and his crew reversed in to Cookstown Police Station. And I do not know why the barrier was up or down or whether they forced the barrier. I never got that cleared up. The Sanger door was open. Side doors of the highest van slung open, and out hopped McGlinchey and his chums with an Uzi submachine gun and raked Sanger. The two guys in the Sanger, Colin was one of them, and another full-time reserve man was also in it. Colin was killed outright, and not one bullet hit the other guy who cowered in the corner. That had a profound effect on me because I always felt that I was the next guy in after Colin. and I was going to be the best policeman I could because of his efforts to try and get into the police. And it, it the memory of his killing, and by the way, a mate of mine who was in my section immediately after the killings went chasing after McGlinchey and the Red Highest fan around the Loch Shore, and he would tell me there was two of us in an armed Cortina chasing this Red Highest van, and all we had on us that day, because they sprang out of the station, because all we had on was the Ruger revolvers up against an Uzi submachine gun. And so Cookstown was landmine city in and around that area. There was, before I arrived at Cookstown, there was a big, huge landmine at the bottom of the Molesworth Road. Two ways to get to Cookstown Station, via the town and Molesworth Road at the other end. And the Provies had laid a huge landmine in a culvert at Molesworth Road at the countryside. And this old guy and his sheepdog unearthed the command wire with the two Provies at the other end of it. That's how committed they were to be doing it, that very, very imminently. And police cars only came in and out of Molesworth Road one way. But as a result of that, the dog dug up the landmine, the command wire, and he physically identified the two guys, and the thing went to court. Long story short, not surprisingly, the witness on the first day of the court case declined to identify them again. The case was thrown out. But that was Cookstown. Pomeroy, very dangerous place. Coke, dangerous. Stewartstown, dangerous. All around the Loch Shore, dangerous patrolling. And in those days, you're driving an armored Land Rover, and it had a very distinctive sound. Like if I'm a provo, I'm going to pick an armored vehicle out easy on a 5 o'clock in the morning on a summer's day, or sitting waiting by a landmine. Easy peasy. So it was very, very lucky to survive, as were lots of us, you know.
Did you ever feel, as you were driving along in the back of one of these, did you ever feel like kind of any moment?
All through my service, you would get days where you really felt hexed. You even in Belfast, going home to my house off a night shift, you just got this feeling they're waiting for me, and this is what stress does. It's layers of stress, day in, day out. If you're in the British Army, you're coming to Northern Ireland, maybe doing a stag for a few months, and then you're going out again. With us, it was every day. When I was at Cookstown, I stayed in a Portakabin in the station. Portakabin B1 with a black and white portable TV with a coat hanger aerial, and I could watch 2 channels, and that was my life. And you were doing every month 100 hours overtime, and it was exhausting. And you had to develop a trickle cell sort of energy, whereupon when you were out at patrolling, you were looking and you were watching your observing, but you were trying to dampen down your nervous energy, because you had maybe 5 doubles to do of 12-hour shifts or 16-hour shifts, and you just had to manage your emotions.
I was going to say, okay, so I mean, being posted in Cookstown, were you still doing like the ordinary police type stuff?
Yeah.
Just trying to combat.
Yeah. Now there was MS, there was K1 MSU, and they would have been more terrorist orientated. But I was local station in Cookstown. I went to the road traffic accidents, the burglaries, the disorderlies, Saturday night kickouts at the Glenavon House Hotel or the Glenavon or Milton Tom's Royal. You know, it's just normal policing.
How far? Okay, so like during your okay, so I'll go back one. Would you have known like the fellas? Okay, so like the East Tyrone kind of A team who were killed in Loughgall, 88. Would you have
Yeah.
known? Would you have known if I came along and like even like a couple of years into your Cookstown time, if I came along with like a list of those names and faces, would you have known who like Jim Lina was or McCarney or Patrick Kelly or any of them?
You you really only got to know a name's something on a bit of paper. John. You really only got to know somebody if you actually met them, looked them in the eye, encountered them, and until you really got that meet with somebody or got their car and got them stopped, had a chat with them, that's when you really got to know these people. Cookstown, our patch was 140 square miles. The chances of you stopping one of these guys, unless you're directed, tasked to, he's coming this way, I want you to be there, needle in a haystack. And for me, I knew a few of the players, and I cannot remember any of their names now. Um, like the Godfather ones that lived out in the Drum Road. There was one, but I can't remember his name. It's like 40 years ago.
Okay, so during your time posting Cookstown, there was a few very significant attacks done by the East Tyrone crowd. The biggest of which, I guess, the Ballygawley RUC station attack.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the exact type of attack that they were trying to do, where they would
a spectacular.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That in that case, kill a few RUs if you can, and disable the station. So like being in Cookstown, would Ballygawley have been like far enough for you to get called in to help support? No.
Nope, too far away. I would never have been called anywhere out that distance, John. No.
Even for like a big emergency like this, no.
I can't imagine so. I wasn't there for the Ballygawley one. Maybe the K1 MSU boys might have been called down there, but not the local station boys.
I see. What was I going to say? Okay, I assume you remember hearing about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an attack on an RUC station. I mean, you work in an RUC station. How did that make you feel in terms of your own security, like this huge successful attack on a station like yours, you know?
You were never off guard, John. You know, it was a case of your existence was nearly like a Russian roulette scenario where you knew that if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, you were going to be killed. Whether or not it was a spectacular killing, there was somebody walking up behind you, putting a bullet in the back of your head, which happened to a couple of my friends. You couldn't preordain or pre-plan or plan against anything happening because the terrorist had all the advantages. You know, he could plan it. The provost could plan it for weeks, suss it out. We just had to do our best not to get caught up in things. But even some of the best officers were caught out. You know, a landmine, culvert. How do you plan against those? And your culvert clearance is only as good as the last time you checked it. And 2 days later, it could be packed again. You know, it was just a never-ending game of cat and mouse, and it was scary.
There was also during your time there was the attack on a station in the Birches, kind of near Portadown. Am I correct?
I have no recollection of that, John. I'm sorry.
Oh, really? It was one of their bigger. I don't think quite as big as Ballygawley, but it was a successful attack on the station. Okay, fair enough. You mentioned you were posted out of Cookstown in what, like 87, 88? Sorry, no, 86.
I went to the 86. I think I went to the Belfast MSU 86, 87.
Okay,
but I was transferred back to Belfast because I was getting married, and I went and joined number 6 unit, Belfast MSU, known as the Silvers. They were based out of Musgrave Street.
Okay, I'm sticking on just to kind of wrap up and put a bow on the East Tyrone time. You said that despite despite not being posted there for the Ballygawley bus attack, which was one of the biggest takings of life of the British Army by the Army in one go.
Yeah.
You said that you were there for this kind of horrific and cleanup. You said it had quite an effect on you. If
I was in the Silvers, Belfast MSU, when the Ballygawley atrocity took part. It was an army bus, 28 soldiers on board, and 8 were killed. It happened at night, and I can't remember whether we were called the next day to clear up the scene or the day after. We arrived at work in Musgrave Street. Right, lads, today we're going here. We're going there as a unit. We were told we were going to clear up a scene at Ballygawley. We were all aware of what had happened with the army guys in the bus. And I'm just thinking, right, okay, it's like rubbish, clothing, anything that might be of security, whatever, just tidy up the place. And we got our blue boiler suits on, the sort that a mechanic would wear materially, and police hats. And I'll never forget wearing my black public order gloves. These are just bog standard stuff you'd really wear driving a car to work, and going to Ballygawley this day. And it was cold, it was windy, and it was like a stretch of a motorway with banking on either side. And when we got there, our bosses had these bags for us to use to pick up the rubbish. And the bags were really, really thick plastic bags. You could hardly bend them. They were sort of like opaque, but not 100% clear. Really, you'd struggle nearly to fold them in two. They were that thick plastic. Got you in your cruise, right, guys? You clear up that section, you clear up that section, you clear up that. And you went with your mates. And very soon you realized that you were not only picking up socks, and shoes, letters, you were finding bits of human flesh, limbs, shredded skin that was like not as cut neatly, it was just like flayed flesh lying in the grass, sticking in the grass. If I'm going over the top here, John, just tell me to wind it back a bit.
No. In fact, detail what we want to.
When I'm getting to the top of the bank, and there's these sort of hawthorny, thickety, tree shrubby things, and you're reaching out for bits of paper or sock, human flesh. And the day I die, I'll never forget, there were crows sitting on the same thicket fence, picking at the flesh. And I'm thinking, what do I do here? Do I shush the crows away? I'm not going to get every bit of flesh. And then I looked at my gloves, John, and they're just a mess of scum, like human flesh. These weren't disposable forensic gloves that you could, nor were we wearing those lovely tissue type forensic-y suits that they have these days. And we were just a mess at the end of this operation. And we were expected to take our gloves home with us and wash them and bring them back the next day for duty. And one of the most horrific things I've ever had to do, but I had to do that several times in my career. And as I say, knew nothing about who was on the bus. All I was doing was picking up body parts.
Was this the first time that you had to do something like that?
I'm not sure in which which order the bus was. There was an incident where a Royal Naval recruitment officer was blown up in a car bomb, and I've had to research this, John, because it's been so long ago. I always thought mentally it was just I couched it at Middlepath Street, Lower East Belfast. Some people say the Victoria Bridge, but again, our crew, I was in the Silvers MSU, were the first on the scene at that atrocity, and the car bomb had gone off, and this poor guy had been blown to smithereens. And I can remember because I played golf in those days, and noticing first of all, it's just abstract memories I now have. Oh my God, he played golf. You know, what the, why would you speak? And I had to set the cordon up, and so that the appropriate agencies could get in and do the forensic work and stuff like that there. And there was a car park maybe 50 yards on down the road. So decided to extend the cordon out to there, and there was a maroon Volvo state vehicle sitting there, and as I'm walking over to it, there's an eyeball sitting on the roof of it, and perfect, as if it was a glass sitting there. I'm like, oh my God. So that's probably the second time. And then during the IPLO INLA feud, again, we were the first crew that arrived. A guy called by the name of Emmanuel Gargan, I think he was in the INLA. He was murdered in Hatfield Bar. We were there. And his brains were shotgun in the back of the head. His brains were splattered up. These red velvet, what I would consider velvet. Maybe my wife would say something else. But look, velvety curtains. We arrived at the pub, and everybody's still drinking. It's like, what? What? But yeah, lots of things you remember even to this day, John.
Taking us back to that Ballygawley bus bomb cleanup. Did you was there what while doing the job, while doing the picking up body parts, was there like a numbness?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. And maybe you should be asking me, well, did you feel hate? Did you feel anger? Did you feel for me? And the guy beside me, if he was with me now, might have a different thing to say to you. For me, it was when is this all going to end? You imagine the guys maybe 12 hours earlier coming back from a break. They'd been on a break or something, John, and reading up on it afterwards. When it went off, some of the guys thought it was just a normal road crash. That were in the Land Rover. The bus had lost its place in the road. There you go.
How do you go back home after doing something so horrific and traumatic like that? Do you go home and just do you vent to some degree to anyone? Do you tell some of the details, keep the rest to yourself, keep it all to yourself? You
just keep it inside. I always refer to it as wrapping it up, putting it in the cupboard, and putting it away. But someday, somewhere along the line, you've got to open that cupboard up, take everything out again, and face up to it, which I've done. But then you couldn't afford to dwell on atrocities because it'll pull you down, it'll break you, it'll take whatever level of edge you've got away from you. And you've got to stay focused, and you've got to stay true to the job that you wanted to do, to be a police officer in the province.
It
wasn't easy.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, did while you're picking up the parts of these dead soldiers, like would it affect the way you see your own mortality? I think it would be I think it'd be easy to be picking up these bits of flesh and body parts and stuff and be thinking, Jesus, like this could easily be my hand that someone else is picking up, or my skin that someone's watching a crow eat off a head.
Yep, absolutely. And it never stopped. It's never stopped. It was nearly like something's bound to happen one day, especially when really good friends were getting murdered. I'm thinking you get this sort of survival guilt. I don't know if anyone's ever mentioned that to you, where you sort of feel guilty, especially when you're tired. You have this survival guilt. You think, why am I still here? There's better people than me. Are no longer here. There you go.
If you don't mind me asking, how how long into your career was it before someone who you considered to be like a good friend or a close friend did get killed?
I would suggest about 10 years. Now,
Okay, so
funnily enough, silly short story. The only guy that ever was killed in my squad, 50, died as a result of a road traffic accident in England because his boss had been murdered in Portrush. He decided, not for me, I'm heading off, start a new life across the water, and he died in a road traffic accident. A good friend of mine was murdered in Lurgan, shot in the back of the head while doing neighbourhood duties. I called John Graham. He was a Christian fella, really nice guy, not a bad bone in his body, married with kids.
That Ballygawley cleanup that you had to do. When you look back on it, did it what was there like a marked change in you? Was it kind of a before and after moment in some way?
No, just it's just something that you absorb and go on because you don't know where the end is. You don't know where the end is. You have to go on. You don't want to let down your colleagues. You don't freak out. You want to be professional. Go on. If you remember that all this has happened, the car bomb in Middlepath Street, the IPLO INLA murder in Hatfield Bar, and this is happening very, very close to each other. There had also been the other murder scenes were just purely murder scenes. And I'd also been to punishment shootings where folks are getting shot in the legs and stuff like that. It's happening every day, John. In Northern Ireland, during the Troubles, between 1983, I think, to the 1990s, I think there was roughly between 80 and 100 deaths a year directly related to the Trouble. So you're getting basically a murder every 3 days. And if you stop and dwell, it'll crush you. And that's the life you lived. And you had to go home. And you had to have your days off with your family and pretend you were normal to the guy who worked Shorts Brothers next door, or the guy that worked in the bank. You played golf with guys that had nothing to do. And they didn't know where you'd been the night before, what you'd seen, or what you had to deal with it. And but you had to go on. I went on for my family and for my colleagues.
God, yeah, that must be it must be incredibly tough having to put all this stuff that no human should see now, like fella's brains splattered all over a wall, or bodies that have been blown up, having to go and do the normal life stuff that everyone, a family, has to do, and you still have to be a role model for your kids and be supportive for your wife and all that kind of thing. Did mind me asking, like, for like your close family, you mentioned that you wouldn't really talk about the the really tough days in the job with them. Afterwards, what was it something you've gone into them? I'd imagine it would help them understand you kind of in retrospect once they can fill in all the contextual gaps of
John,
what.
I would love to give you a Disney answer to that. Um, you know, picture perfect response to that question, which is a very good question. But me and my first wife split up in 1995, and I was away so much, and then he was raising our two kids, and we sort of grew apart, or maybe I grew apart. I don't know. I would love somebody to climb into my attic and have a good rummage around. I don't have the answer. Um, did the troubles or did my experiences have an effect on my marriage? Probably, most definitely. Um, but then again, who knows?
What did you were you ever tempted to again if it's isn't too personal a question, were you ever tempted to like self-medicate in some way to kind of drown your
Drink, take alcohol.
or any kind of or any kind of substance, yeah.
Definitely alcohol. Um, when you're in the place, there's only so many places you can. The rule of thumb is you don't associate with anybody really other than police, because that's a risk to your personal safety. Which is another kick-off when you retire, when there's peace. You're still living, and nobody's told you, hey, Hilty, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't. You become like one of Pavlov's dogs. You are conditioned to being antisocial, nearly, keeping yourself to yourself, watching what you say, watching where you go, blah 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 blah. And certainly in those days, when you got time off, you would go and have a drink and blow out. Uh, it, it was just a coping mechanism. There's no drugs in those days. It was just alcohol.
I've heard as well that like I don't know how much you would talk about the job and your feelings and stuff with other officers. Probably not that much back then, but I've heard as well like the only people who can kind of understand what you've gone through and why the type of stress you're feeling and why you're feeling stress are other coppers, because no matter how much explaining you could do to me, there's no way that you could really impress upon me what it was like and how it felt, and these unique sort of emotions that would come with the job. Only other coppers would understand that.
It's tried by fire. That's a biblical parlance, and I apologize for it, but you've been through a very, very unique and deadly experience together. And only those that were there understand it. But the other thing is your memories of those bad days are as vivid as they were now as they were then, if you know what I mean. You can't get them off you. I'd retired 10 years. Maybe this is now time to start talking about the book, or
I was actually just about to mention you talked about your memory. You talked about your memory, and it seems to me like you have a very vivid memory, which is something that would lend itself greatly towards writing. Which you've done. There's a book on the left side of our screen.
Dear podcasters, this is very, very quickly. I was sitting having a cup of coffee with a friend, Big Stevie, who was involved in the Newry mortar attack. By the way, his life was saved by a door frame. But anyway, having a cup of coffee in the Cherry Scone, Dundonald, this day, 10 years after I'd retired from policing. And I said, Stevie, do you get these dreams every night? Every night I go to bed, I have dreams about police. Some are nice dreams, some are fluffy dreams, some are shite dreams. And when I mean shite dreams, I'm in a station which has been attacked, and I'm being paged to my vehicle. I can't find my flak jacket, can't find my hat, can't find my pens, can't find my gun, can't run. Then you're waking up in cold sweat. That never happened to me when I was in the job, because I had a pen in every pocket. I was Mr. Just in case, just in case. These dreams kept coming back. He says, Hildy, I think you maybe have got your post-traumatic stress going on there. 10 years, you think all these nightmares would stop, but they were steady. And went and seen a psychiatrist of the PRRT, Police Training Rehabilitation Trust. And she suggested, and this was just before COVID started, suggested, why don't you keep a diary? We talked about my worst experiences in the job that unlocked this key of stress. Don't want to waste too much time. And first one was a Tyndale Community Centre murder of a female, which was my first bad experience in the job. But anyway, who was about to start? And just, why don't you keep a diary? Just keep a diary of what you're doing every day. Right, okay, I'll try that. And off I goes to Spain, my wee Spanish hideout, bolt hole. COVID arrives. I can't get back to Belfast. I go into the shop this day to buy a diary. The diary's €5 and a jotter's 80 cents. I look at the jotter. Diary, what am I going to say every day? My diary. I have nothing to say. I am going to write a book, a novel. I lifted this thing at 80 cents, went to back to my wee spot in Spain and started YouTube. How do you write a book? How do you write a novel? Like, John, it's ridiculous how stupid I am. As in, why would you even want to try? Why would you even think you've got a novel in you? I just listen to all these American emails and write about something. Right, please. I started to write a novel, crime thriller, set in Belfast, East Belfast, 1983, about a dysfunctional police section and a sexual attacker. And 88,000 words later, I read bits of it out to my wife, and she's an avid reader. She writes 5 books a week. And one passage I read, she's crying. And I thought, is it that fucking bad that she's in tears? She said, this moved me. And that was a real spur. So I submitted 88,000 words of a manuscript off to 3 publishers. Long story short, podsters, sorry for boring you. All 3 publishers wanted to publish me. It's got great reviews and a good reads. I think it's trailing at 4.6 in Amazon. It's called Mountroyal, guys. If you want to know a crime thriller story set in East Belfast, 1983. Folks say it's funny, it's sad, but it's my guts are in there, and I want to try and get the reader to feel what it was like to be a police officer, an authentic police officer at that time. That's it. No more talk about it.
Oh, you're going okay. Oh no, very good.
No, but I mean, I don't want to bore the podcasters, but it was my motivation. I found it a release, but a lot of my colleagues can't read it, or my colleagues, because it's too looking back too hard. You know, it's places I don't want to go anymore, and that sort of surprised me. For me, it was cathartic. For them, Hildy, I can't read that, and that's how badly we are after all this.
I can understand. It's funny now, like obviously, I love interviewing like people who were there and we say the primary sources and stuff, but I can always understand if someone doesn't want to talk at all, or doesn't even want to think about it, or doesn't want to watch a documentary about it, or a film about it, or a book about it, because they were there and they lived through it. I can completely understand someone saying I've been through it. I don't want to know anymore. I want to just put it behind me. At the same time, I can also understand someone who lived through the conflict generally wanting to later make sense of it. So there's like a context in their mind. But both make sense to me. But I can understand someone who lived traumatic, not wanting to.
Yeah. Also, for me, I've read too much about bad press about the police at that time by people that weren't in the police, and what I'm doing through fiction is just trying to, maybe through the spaces and the gaps in the lines, invite somebody into the hot seat of a police response vehicle in 1983 and ask them, how do you feel? How are you feeling at the moment? What's going on in your head? What is there a come on device? Are you heading to a come on here, son? Is this, am I going to my death? We got called to bomb. I got called to bomb alerts all the time in the Belfast city centre, clearing car parks, high street car parks, levels of tons of cement and cars looking for a car that might be going off, segments clearing car parks waiting around. I could be dead in a minute. How are you feeling? How are you feeling here? As you're reading this book, what's it making you feel? Because that's how it was. And that's why it's all supposed to be funny in places. So anyway, no more talk about it. I don't want to spoil your podcast.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'll put a link for the book. I'm sure. I'm sure people listening would be interested. I wanted to ask you there about obviously being a police officer, especially at the time, like very dangerous job, even for someone like to find out about. Did you like for your kids and stuff? Did they like when they told people what their dad did they have like something else that they would make
Yeah,
up?
I was. You see, my previous job I was a civil servant. In Snugville Street, social security officer. So I could just describe myself as a visiting officer, and even if I went to a pub or somewhere where, what do you do for a living, which was a typical Northern Ireland question, or where do you live, or what football team do you support? The usual trying to frame you in a green or orange. I was just a civil servant.
You'd probably have to be careful. I was just reading, and I told someone else, I was reading in Killing Rage that Eamon Collins was recruiting some fella who used to like fix tellies or something. He a job that went into people's houses, and he told them about a fella. Oh, I went in to do a job in someone's house, and I saw an RUC I'm hanging up on the wall. That kind of thing. Would that have been a concern for you?
No, because generally, if something happened, like the plumbing went, your heating was, you asked your mates, who can we trust? Any plumbers out there? Pro police, and that's the way it was. You didn't just go to Yellow Pages, and it was very, you're very careful about who you got to work at your house, stuff like that there.
Okay, so we'll move on to other parts of your career. But you mentioned before to me that despite in 1988 you were no longer posted in East Tyrone, but not the Loughgalls in East Tyrone, but you actually got called out to work after the Loughgall ambush. Do you want to tell us about that?
It's just a very quick one. I was supposed to be off the next day, which was obviously the day of the Loughgall ambush / massacre. And we're out at a friend's house partying, and I arrived home at 3 a.m. to my house in East Belfast, and I was a bit fluffy around the edges, and knackered but thrilled that I was off next day. Head hit the pillow, and the phone rang at 3:30. I'd got 30 minutes sleep. I was slightly fluffy around the edges. Get your ass into work, which was Musgrave Street. I was in the Silvers then. In major incident, Loughgall. Nowadays, too much to drink. Have I done? You just got up and done as you were told in those days. Nobody was standing with breathalyzers. Got the uniform on, and off I went to Loughgall. We were posted at this roundabout, or this junction, somewhere on the outskirts of Loughgall, and I spent 12 hours, 12 of the longest and worst hours of my career in the police service, standing there, diverting traffic. And sorry, John, is my Loughgall story. It was cruel, it was torturous, it was an atrocity. It's part of Northern Ireland's, the province's tapestry. And I was there in the fringes. I was at Ballygawley when the bus went up. I was at roundabout at Loughgall. I seemed somehow to got myself in the way of things, There you go.
You used the word atrocity. Would you that's a term you would describe to you would use to describe what happened at Loughgall?
Yeah, of course.
Not just like not like a military operation in which like terrorists.
No. I hear where you're coming from, John, and I appreciate you you're trying to make a distinction. Well, how can it be atrocity if terrorists are killed or not, or if British forces killed? I think all death's an atrocity, or what makes somebody want to go and commit murder is an atrocity. And
That's,
loss of life
that's
is just
what I
for me
mean.
is it means just very sad. It's all very sad.
But even at the time, would you have had that? I mean, literally, the IRA, the IRA had at that stage maybe not killed any colleagues you knew, but I killed plenty of RUC men. You were, by dint of the fact that you wear that uniform, you're a sworn enemy of any IRA.
Yeah, yeah,
As
yeah,
well. You,
yeah.
you didn't see it like as like a win for ye. That obviously at the time you didn't know like who had been taken out, that it was like the A team and stuff, but it didn't even feel like a big win for you and
Or
RUC.
a proactive service unit getting taken out by the SAS, wasn't it? I think it
Yeah,
was.
correct, yeah.
Uh, the the only the only positive thing I would maybe garner out of it is maybe less lives would be taken, But I still took no delight in anybody's death or gloated in it or anything like that there because it's just not in me. I'm not that way inclined.
You wouldn't have even thought that like, okay, this area that I used to police, I don't anymore, but there's still, I know what it's like to police East Tyrone. You wouldn't have even thought like, okay, at least the IRA who want to be attacking East Tyrone, RUC stations and so on, that they were dealt a blow, that wasn't in your mind then even.
It's like an ASU's been taken out, and all of a sudden this ASU's now a martyr, dying for the cause of a free Ireland or a united Ireland, dying doing what they wanted to do for their cause. Uh, within the murder of that active service unit, you're going to get more recruits following on. So for me, it wasn't a case of, yep, that's the war's over. And you knew that it wasn't over. And I honestly can say that I don't glorify in any death. But I get where you're coming from, but that's not the way I seen it. But the guy beside me might see it completely different.
Interesting. Do you have any thoughts? You wouldn't have known at the time, but now that you've looked back and learn about kind of about what happened at Loughgall and everything, do you have any feeling as to okay, the Republicans will use the term to shoot to kill. I think it's a bit of a misnomer, given that when the army shoot at someone, it's with the intention of killing them. But more, I think a more suitable term would be like an overkill policy, where like a lot of fellas would say that the Loughgall crowd, they could have been taken alive, which is what you're supposed to do if you're a government army and you're up against terrorists. You're not a terrorist yourself. That they should have been taken alive and could have been, but instead they pumped hundreds and hundreds of rounds into them, turned them into Swiss cheese.
Mm-hmm. What do I feel about that?
Any thoughts on whether they should be taken alive, or more of an effort should be, or is it like, look, they're playing a big boy game with big boy rules, and if you're going to live by the gun, you die by it too. Like,
we could you and I could make the exact same argument, and maybe it's like the curate's egg, John. Some parts of it are excellent. What you've just said there, the guy to the left of me might agree 100% with you. I might think, no, they should have been taken alive. Somebody to the right of me might say 1,000 bullets wouldn't be enough for those, sure, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's happened, and it's a societal thing. And again, I still say all loss of life is an atrocity.
so you would have like, would you have had the same kind of attitude to the British soldiers killed in the Ballygawley bus attack as Loughgall? In your mind, were they just, it's terrible that these men have died or were killed at all? What was that your kind of mentality like for both?
Probably you'd have slightly or more sympathy for the soldiers than the inverted commas terrorists. But still, I still say it's just such a waste of life. You know, these guys had to been born in a different postcode, might have grown up to be best friends. The army guys had been born in Coal Island or Kappa, might have been the terrorist. It's just tragic. The Northern Ireland story is tragic, and hopefully we're getting out of it.
I always find that slightly ironic that I think a lot of the type of fellas who become soldiers, probably if they had been born anywhere in the North, Republican area, they probably would be the type who would sign up. There's kind of an irony that the types of guys who sign up are the ones who end up like clashing with each other.
But also, John, the psychopaths in Northern Ireland, whether they were Protestant or Catholic, terrorist, IRA, UDA, the psychopaths flourished in Northern Ireland. They flourished.
They have an outlet. Yeah,
they had an outlet to kill.
That is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that's one of the things about conflicts anywhere. Even someone who, there's the people who are going to commit do psychopathic acts, even normal circumstances, but there's people who in a normal kind of civilized world wouldn't, but if their world then gets to a more chaotic state where you can get away with a lot of violent things because of bigger scale violent things going on, there's people who will kind of live out their psychopathic tendencies where they wouldn't have before. Yeah, that's something.
It's also as well, John. Killers come in all different shapes and sizes. I encountered several killers. One you'd bring home to your mother and say, "Could we have this guy home for tea? He's such a pleasant guy."
From what group?
He was a provo. Anytime you stopped him, he could have been in a boy band. Always immaculate, well spoken, but he was a killer. And then another provo, when you stopped him, he trembled with hate. You knew this guy would kill you at the drop of a hat. But yet both were killers. Come in all different shapes and sizes. And had you not known that Killer A was killer, and this guy said he would never be taken alive, you would never believe it. And he was the one that could mingle perfectly in society, not attract attention.
On that note, there must have been that same principle. Okay, so the psychopaths and the sociopaths in society, they have their various paramilitary groups that they can join, and they can kind of live out their psychopath, the psychopathic
flourish, just flourish.
Exactly. The same thing would have to apply, I'm sure, to the RUC. There must have been officers that you saw who kind of had more, who would be more towards the psychopathic end of the spectrum, and who have an opportunity to abuse power, which people will. It's kind of an accepted psychological thing that people will abuse power if given it. You must have seen examples of that.
Well, what I will say is there's some guys handier with their fists than others.
I
never seen anybody do the first hit, as it were. Or, I was more of a wrestler. Are you talking about somebody really stepping outside the line of the uniform and giving a pasting to somebody, or what are you trying to say?
Not too. Yeah, I guess taking the opportunity to physically.
Basically abusing his role
Yeah, but
by
also,
getting, yeah.
but also like the fact that, yeah, a lot of it can be very subjective. You can pick on people if there's someone you just don't like. You can pick on them with a lot of these kind of legal things and harass them for every little thing.
Mm.
Being a bully, you must have seen, when you think back, you must have think you must like have certain memories where you think like, God, that officer really was like abusing his power. He was just kind of using it like arbitrarily.
Well, you might have seen you might have seen the odd police officer, inverted commas, abusing his power, maybe being a bit too big for his boots in certain situations, but they didn't last very long. Somebody somewhere along the line usually took them in, or something would happen to them out in the streets. Um, there was a way to behave with the public. There was a thing called the attitude test. I don't know whether that's come under your. Whereas I'd be as nice as ninepence to you, providing you pass the attitude test. Um, you fail the attitude test, you might take things to a different perspective with me. Not that I'm going to give you a dig in the chops or anything untoward, but I'm nice to you when you're nice to me. You want to cross the line a wee bit, then things could change. And but as I say, nothing I ever did, and I can hand on heart, on it on the outskirts of boundaries of what I should be doing in a uniform.
Okay, very good. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned that 86 you got posted to Musgrave Street. Um, can you tell us about the INLA IPLO feud that you kind of
When
not saw, but you were
when
there.
when when that was kicking off, as I say, there was death happening all the time in Belfast, bombs going off, punishment shootings happening. The IRA was the main uh, force that we were up against, along with maybe the UVF, trying to keep those attack dogs apart. IPLO, INLA came into view, and talk was there was a feud going on. IPLO, I think Dr. Death, Jared Steenson, was IPLO. Not kicked off, but as far as I was concerned, personally, they were terrorists. All of them would want to kill me, given half the chance. And our job really was to stop, take their details, search them under the Prevention Terrorism Act, and then attend scenes when they were killing each other.
Would you, if someone came along to you, like, who had no clue at the time, and said, okay, look, can you characterize some of the differences between the INLA and the IRA, in like practical terms, not so much there, like
Well, we considered INLA to be more spontaneous than the provost. Provost would have planned things better, been better organized. Uh, our view was that INLA was more spontaneous, which got you a wee bit more on edge because you could sort of monitor the provost, whereas INLA were just a wee bit left of center and a wee bit out there. Um, but it's also very interesting. I was involved in the Supergrass trials. If you're any interest in that, Harry Kirkpatrick He was the INLA, or was he pro? He uh, he was sentenced initially to murdering 2 police officers, 2 UDR officers, and a territorial army officer. And then he went and gave Queen's evidence, and George Steenson was in the box for the same thing. And I stood for several weeks at the Crown Court, listening to this trial going on, standing behind the judge, looking at Mr. Steenson. And the guy looked no more like a terrorist than Santa Claus. He sort of looked like a university kind of guy. And when all this grilling was going on, all this nastiness was going on, where the guy just sat so mellow, so chilled. And I'm thinking, they can't knock a dent in this guy. But as I say, he didn't last too long. Did you know, you were just by the by, there was a tunnel between Crumlin Jail up into the courthouse. That used to be good fun. When there was remands going on, the odd fight would take place down there.
Going back to like stopping fellas, you said there would be certain fellas, they could be a stone cold killer, but they'd come across like a choir boy and stuff. Would there be fellas who, even if they weren't giving you any hostility, you would just feel something different about them? I've heard with some of the more kind of psychopathic fellas that there would almost be like a chilly air about them, and even if you kind of didn't quite know who they were, you could tell this is a serious sort of fella. Would you get that?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But for the other guy I mentioned, who was like one of the Backstreet Boys, you would not have got it from him. But some guys, they just had it about them. And also from the Orange side, the Protestant side, very much so. They probably, the very bad boys are really let you know they were bad.
Did you see either the Republicans or the Protestant paramilitaries? Did you, again, like if I came along to you at the time and asked like you to characterize differences in them, like would you have described either one as like more competent or more committed or anything like that?
It's just my opinion, podcasters out there. It's just my opinion. I felt that the provosts were probably more committed than the prods. The prods weren't fighting for anything other than staying part of Britain, as I seen it, the UK. So they had what they wanted. And then they were managing their people. And then they were doing their business as well. Whereas the provosts were always proactive, trying to bring the establishment down, brick by brick. My opinion.
Okay, so something a very interesting topic I wanted to talk to you about was the policing of IRA funerals or Republican funerals, at least. When you think about it, it's an incredibly tough kind of balancing act and tightrope walk that needs to happen. I mean, literally, if it's an IRA funeral, you, the RUC, are their sworn enemy, but it's your job to make sure, to try to make sure the funeral isn't attacked or something happens with like a funeral procession where it could break out into a riot or fights or anything. Can you talk to us a bit about the just like the dynamics at play when you're because it's your job, you have to make sure the funerals of men who quite possibly have killed RUC officers, even, you have to make sure their funeral kind of passes without violence or without incident. It's there's like a lot of like spinning plates going on. I've always thought about them.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where no matter what I say in relation to your question, which is a good question, somebody listening will say, you're representing the other side, or you're not being sympathetic in the way you should be, in blah, blah, blah. And I guess at the time, the British government said no paramilitary trappings, no firing volleys of gunshots over recruits' graves. Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom, and this won't be tolerated. It won't be tolerated in Belfast. It wouldn't be tolerated in Birmingham. It wouldn't be tolerated in London. Not going to happen. Therefore, you find yourself as a police officer at funerals, whether it be up country way or in Belfast, keeping an eyes on. And remember, we're a force of 13,000. We have loads of manpower, highly trained manpower. I think there was an incident, was it in Birmingham a couple of days ago in UK, where there was major public disorder, and the police.
Oh, that was it. Was that Leeds, maybe, or maybe it
Was
might have
Leeds,
been.
Birmingham?
I know the one you're talking about. I think it's
Folks were saying the police stood around and didn't know what that wouldn't have happened in Northern Ireland, because then with a police force of 13,000, we were ready for anything that was going to happen. And the funerals were very, very hard work. They really were, because you were sent there to stop paramilitary funerals taking place. No tricolours, no berries, no gunshots over coffins. The bosses would inform the family that this wasn't going to happen. If it didn't happen, they could carry on with the funeral. Politics came into play, and scenes happened and played out to the world. And it was, again, a fact of life. You were there. You had to deal with it.
Did it ever happen with a funeral that you were attending where they did do the gun salute, and you just like you're then in a position where like, fuck it, okay, we can go into we can send our men into a bloody funeral to try to get the guns off them and stuff, but that's like bull in a china shop stuff, because it's someone's funeral and most of these people are innocent. You're gonna it's just so much.
I was at the Marley funeral. I don't know any podcasters. I think it took 4 days for us, that funeral to happen, because they wanted
organizing, or
pardon me,
4 days like in preparation for it.
No, 4 days. I think it took about 4 days for that funeral to take place. When it was supposed to take place, when it actually did take place, because they wanted to make it a paramilitary funeral, and the coffin was going in and out of the house for 4 days. The place was flooded with police, and I think Marley was sort of like an Ardoin address. Sorry if I'm wrong, folks. It's been a long time. And eventually, when it did kick off, when the funeral did take place, it was escorted all the way to Milltown Funeral with vast amount of police presence. And a lot of it was on foot, and I was on foot with my colleagues, and the streets were lined with people supporting the funeral, which is their right. That's fine. Then violence would start, and women and children would be at the front, men would be at the back, and I can say it's because I was there. I seen it. And next thing was, you've got your riot shield, got your baton, you're walking down the street, cortege is behind you, in front of you, or whatever. Next thing, the hammers are coming up over the front, over the top of the women and the kids, attacking you and your colleagues. And this isn't hearsay. Going, this is what I seen. This is what I experienced. And again, I can perfectly understand why folks would want this, feel that way against the British, the RUC, as well, the British police force. But we had it from all ends during the struggle. But that was a long day, 4 hours it took us to go from the Ardoin to Milltown Cemetery. Walking in full riot gear.
from your perspective, you weren't. I'm sure you weren't like posted to it or anything. But in I believe it was in '88 the funerals of the three in Gibraltar that were killed, and then Michael Stone attacked one of the funerals, and then a couple of days later, the car with the two corporals drove into the funeral procession. They were both killed.
I watched that as it happened. How in Wood, the two corporal. It was being played live on, I think, a heli telly, and I was in the Silvers and we were in Musgrave Street and we watched that murder unfold. It was terrible.
Must have been sorry, just to go back to the Michael Stone one, like from the perspective of an RUC officer, like it looks to a lot of people like the RUC just kind of didn't bother protecting the funeral, and Michael Stone was able to go in shooting a handgun and flaking grenades at people. Like from your perspective, what kind of went wrong from an RUC point of view?
I have no idea. I remember watching that on the news as well. I don't know where the police were that day, whether or not they'd given assurances that nothing untoward was going to happen at the graveyard, and the police stayed back. Or you do something, you're damned. You do nothing, you're damned. And really, this was a lone psychopath. We'd actually searched Michael Stone's house in Dundonald a year or so prior to it, and it was like an ordinary house, an executive house. And I can't even remember to this day what we were searching for, but it was like Fort Knox, metal door, metal windows. Crazy. He was some operator.
What did you?
He was too reckless even for the local paramilitaries. He was way out there, and even his last escapade at storming buildings where he tried to get in, on his own.
I was going to say I remember that one as a kid, and I did this was I can't remember what the year, but like the conflict that I now do a podcast about was something I kind of very peripherally kind of knew about. My stepfather had like loads of books on it, but I kind of never read them or anything, and I just kind of knew that there would been like some kind of conflict up there, and that this Michael Stone fella was kind of from that era. But yeah, it was one of the first things.
But when you think about it, John, he had no backup. He had no get out of jail free. He had no way out. And I'll chat to you offline about a wee bit more about that, because I don't. You'll be interested in what I'm going to say. Sorry, Podsters. Let me chat to John about it.
You're grand. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, you mentioned to me that that you attended or guarded, or whatever you want to call it, a funeral in Crossmaglen, even.
Again, it was summer up the country. We had to get chinooked in and out. I was in the Silvers MSU at the time. Again, that one went off quietly, but it was just bizarre walking up helicopter to a field and then walking up very narrow country lanes and surrounding this very old, beautiful churchyard while a funeral took place. But just crazy. And of course, that particular incident was a high-level threat of a rocket attack on a helicopter, so you're actually breaking yourself when you're up there. All the day's work, and then you went home and watched Coronation Street. It was just crazy time.
Did you again, if someone came along from another country and just asked you to characterize some of the things that made the South Armagh IRA brigade more dangerous and more effective than the others, what do you think you'd have told me at the time?
I would have just said maybe there was a different mindset between, say, the Belfast brigades and the rural brigades. The rural brigades to me seemed more driven or proactive, more planning, more wanting to get their hands dirty as opposed to. It didn't get the same vibe from the Belfast boys, where they drove vans with explosive in it and left them in the city centre and owned downtown radio, bomb mornings. Everything was a wee bit longer arms, further away. Same results. They could cripple Belfast. It only took one bomb to go off in Belfast after 5 bomb scares, to get them to achieve their goal.
Okay, so we will later talk about kind of car bombs and a few that you were incredibly lucky not to get caught by yourself.
Yeah.
I did wanna ask you about the topic of riots. You said you've had to police a number of them. It's something like crowd violence like that. I've always found particularly like scary and unnerving, just because there's you're dealing with your fellow humans, but like when people are in a crowd, there's like no reasoning with them. There's no negotiating with them. You kind of can't like communicate and reason with a mob, and there's so many. You might be more skilled with them. You might have weapons and stuff, but numbers, like numbers can kind of overcome anything like that. Can you talk to me just about some of the riots you were involved in, and just kind of how it felt, like in your head and in your heart at the time, being caught up in them.
Funnily enough, the riots didn't annoy me or get to me as much as other things. Generally, if you were involved in a riot, you were given a street to cordon off, or an area that nobody shall pass this point. Your Land Rovers were drawn up, and you were stood in behind the Land Rovers. If you're told to move or advance, you moved in advance, and you had plenty of support. In public order days, so they weren't so bad, John. For me, there's actually an image, which is one of the iconic ones, where I'm involved in a riot, of an image which happened in Donegal Road. The Land Rover's on fire, and I'm part of a crew standing out the back of it. But again, it was just nearly more, I hate to say it, more fascinating when riots were going on, and you're dodging petrol bombs, you were dodging stones, looking for somebody that might be worthy of an arrest later on. When the riot calmed down under public order offences, your adrenaline was just absolutely gushing out. But it was exciting as well, not scary. You'd plenty of guys about you, for me anyway.
You never felt like proper scared or like really in danger, huh?
No, nope. That's just me. That wasn't one of my. Some people are afraid. Riots didn't bother me. No.
Again,
But again, John, you're well trained. You were well trained. Your mates were either side of you. They were well trained. You've all the kit on. The only thing you'd obviously be worried about is somebody taking a shot, and then that changes out. That changes the whole dynamic.
would you have had a rubber bullet, Spencer, or gun, will say?
An FRG.
It was.
Yes. I was in vehicles with rubber bullets, where riot guns were deployed, and I fired a riot gun once in my career, and I aimed it into the sky.
As a warning shot?
Yeah, just to clear street. I wouldn't. They were too indiscriminate for my liking. Once they got past a certain yardage, they started spiraling off in all different directions. And if you're taking an aimed shot within the required specific distance, and you've fired, given your warning shouts and blah blah, and you're bang, you're firing a rubber bullet, and she's missing, she's spiraling off somewhere else, and that's potentially dangerous. were life-threatening. And I never actually aimed at anyone. Sorry, folks.
No, you're grand, you're grand. I was gonna say, what was I gonna ask you? Oh yeah, did you, like, if someone pulled you aside, like the evening after a riot, or when your shift had finished or something, and if they'd asked you, like, can you on some level kind of sympathize or empathize with the crowd who were rioting? Like do they have like a legitimate grievance, a concern that they're expressing? What at the time do you think you'd have told me?
A lot of the riots I was involved in were generally loyalist riots, and these were genuinely fueled with alcohol, genuinely around specific dates in the year. And when those dates passed, everything returned all of a sudden back to normal. It was like emotive calendar days where uh, they would feel aggrieved about their situation or whatever. And police were the ones to get involved, have a go at. Or they'd be trying to get down to the nationalist side. This is my East Belfast memories talking. So you'd be getting in the way, stopping all this.
What do you think of, like, on that note? I guess like marching season generally. It does now. Obviously, there's tons of like history and tradition and stuff, and people have the right to carry on like traditions and stuff. But does it must serve as like pouring petrol on the fire, like every single year to bring up old kind of, like, what do they call it? Like I know sectarian battles is the right one, but like battles where the Protestant beat the Catholic, and you're commemorating it all these years. Does on some level just kind of serve as a, like, an annual tension stoker?
Yes, it does. Of course, it does. I don't like being rude. Heading into Belfast city centre, if you go down Newtonards Road from the East Belfast, you have to pass a short strand, which is a nationalist area. So if the Orangemen are wanting to march into town every 12th of July, they've got to pass a short strand. If they want to come from South Belfast, they're coming down the Ormer Road past the markets, which is a nationalist area. Any other area, generally Belfast city centre is surrounded by nationalist residences. And it's just getting that level of respect for your fellow human being that when you go by that area, you don't play that inverted commas kick the Pope music. As a matter of fact, the last lot of years that I was involved in the policing, it was the tapping of the drums as I went by those areas. And that's the way ahead. I agree with you. I don't like triumphalism. And hopefully we're getting there.
Interesting, very good. What was the other thing I'm gonna ask you? Oh yeah, okay. You might tell us about God, these various times you've described, like, to me before, like 3 or 4 times when you could or should have died, and given like less fortune,
Yeah. Yep. There, but for the grace of God, John go I. First time I was in the Silvers, and it was at a Bobby Sands memorial. He was a hunger striker for those died during the hunger strike. There was some sort of memorial event going on, and we were stuck in this. I think it was North Belfast in our Land Rovers, just in case anything kicked off. And we were playing cards to stifle the boredom. There's no mobile phones in those days. Just waiting on a call to do something or react to something. And it was this British soldier standing outside our Land Rover. And he had this huge big squelch box on, a huge big antenna. And the effect of this antenna was to make any radio transmissions going through our radio sound as though the frequency was just getting jammed and squealing and squawking. I wish he would clear off. I wish he'd clear off. We later found out that this guy, whether on purpose, nature, by design, or sheer luck, was jamming a signal the provies were trying to trigger to an explosive device hidden in a lamppost where our Land Rover was sitting out of. If that had gone off, we might have been dead.
So sorry, they had got explosives inside of the lamppost, yeah?
Yeah. That's what we were told afterwards, after the event. And here's us thinking, oh, I wish he would clear off. And the guy standing there saving their lives. Crazy. Or I wouldn't be here, maybe.
Do you remember, sorry, do you remember exactly how you found out that it was that particular car and that the provies were trying to set it off? Like, where were you when
the branch boys told us afterwards. A couple of days later, we got word from the branch that see that day you were up at you were lucky boys. The provies were trying to set off a device, but for the soldier there, you would have been gone.
How does it feel? Do you remember how in your heart you felt finding that out?
Yes, relief, but you just felt it could happen anytime. You know, okay, we got away with it, right? What's happening tomorrow? What's on TV tonight? You know, live for today. That was it. Bit of buying. If you dwelt in anything like that, there you go crazy. The other major event was in the Silver's MSU this evening. We're sitting in Belfast city centre and we're just about ready to finish work. I think it was about 10:30 at night. And we get tasked by control to follow this bus up the Crumlin Road because youth had been stoning the bus and it was the last bus going up the. And I was in Silver too this night with a made-up crew, good bunch, but there was only 3 of us in the crew. All right, let's go. We're in a tangy Land Rover. Normal night, quiet night, dark, and off we went after the bus. And as we're approaching the top of the Crumlin Road, there's this almighty thud in the front of the Land Rover, which felt like a sack of coal hitting it. And I'm sitting in the rear of the Land Rover with, I think it was a Sterling submachine gun on my lap, looking out the window. And from Brompton Park, a dark figure emerges out. Next thing I see is flashing. Bullet strikes, leaving the weapon. Next thing, ping, 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 all into the back of the Land Rover. And it turned out that the thing that hit the bonnet of the Land Rover was a drogue bomb, which the provies were developing in those days. It was called a drogue bomb, drogue, DROGUE. It was a bomb with Semtex in it. Semtex, as I said, was used the Ballygawley. It was the first time it had been used, the deadly force against the British soldier. It bounced off the front of the Land Rover but didn't explode. And the guy from Brompton Park was there. Had it exploded, we would have been trying to get out the back of the Land Rover. And he was there to finish us off. But as all this is going on, another Land Rover whizzes down citywards, shouting contact, contact, contact. So he's thinking he's been shot at when really we were the crew that were being shot at. And you're thinking, what? Then we find out it was a drogue bomb. Ordered back to Tennant Street Police Station. Speaks with the duty inspector. Kids, you were lucky there. This could have been very serious. Bloody blah. What were you doing up here anyway? Last bus out of town. Bloody. Have a glass of whiskey. So near-death experience. We had a glass of whiskey. On you go now. Out on patrol. That's the way it was in those days, John.
That is, I was going to say that is crazy to think that
glass of whiskey,
like offered whiskey, offered alcohol as a. I'd have to imagine back then, like the term, the term PTSD, or even the idea of like mental trauma. I don't know if the language, the vocabulary, even around that would have been
No,
like, but I'd have to assume that there would have been no no thought of like counseling for
no,
off or
no,
anything along those lines.
no, nothing. And then finally, and just a quickie, John, the third time, I'm sure there's a fourth time when I was nearly killed, was sitting at a suspect device where the Europa Hotel is. Is it? No, it's not Victoria Street. Can't remember what that street's called. Uh, and it was a device opposite the Europa Hotel, about 100 yards down, and we were in an outer cordon. And actually, where our cordon was where a come on device was sitting, and we were standing right beside this vehicle when the detonator went off.
You
And if
might explain to you what a come on bomb is.
yeah, come on. So the provies called us to vehicle A as a suspect device. Downtown radio got the call, confirmed password, informed the police, car is at such and such, it's parked outside, blah, blah, blah. We'd assumed a cordon, standing beside this vehicle, and next thing goes, bink! And you go, and it was a detonator had gone off, but the device didn't. Now, had the device gone off, I was dead. I was one of the faces in that big image of Varys. You could pick thousands of officers, and they'll tell you the same sort of. There, but for the grace of God, he just went on. We laughed it off.
Did you go home like after that shift feel like with a much different feeling than you had with others, or was it just kind of going home for another day, but this particular day you came this close to seeing a car bomb that would have blown your car?
That could have been that could have been one, but forget about it. What am I on tomorrow? A double? When's my next day off? When can I get a game of golf? When do I want to take the kids out? You live for distraction. You didn't. If you dwelt in anything, John, it was death to your mind. It really was.
I was going to say on that. I've spoken about this with the policemen in like England, like modern day, who would go to the scenes of like road traffic accidents and stuff, and he was say he suffered quite a bit with PTSD and his mental health and stuff, and he said that one of the reasons you kind of couldn't talk about it with your colleagues or in front of your colleagues or show any kind of not weakness, but something that may be perceived as weakness, that like then you're the colleague that your fellow policemen and women feel like they might not be able to rely on, and you'd never want to be the guy that you feel that others think you're like mentally shaky or
100. You're 100%, John. That's correct. You didn't want to let your mates down. And then thinking back on it, years later, you realize that certain guys you were working with really had it. They were really quiet, they were really withdrawn, really tense all the time. And they were coming to work with it. And you just thought they're slightly weird. You know what I mean? It's slightly weird. Because for me, I was always slightly light-hearted. I tried to make everything light and breezy, nice, cool, calm, collected. Do my calls, do my files, do my paperwork, go home. You know, if I didn't think too hard about it, if I was with you in a car for 8 hours in East Belfast, I would try to make it as pleasant for us as possible, even though the next call could be our last call. Because why would you try to make it awkward? Why would you're just trying to make it to the end of the next shift every single day, trying to make it to the end of the next shift.
I've heard as well that that kind of like you alluded to it yourself, but the use of like dark humor as kind of a coping mechanism.
Definitely, yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah.
I mean, the ability to kind of make a joke about something unbelievably grim.
Yeah.
it does seem like something that's necessary to carry through, you know.
Yeah, but we were we were brutal with each other. You know, if you had a slight flaw, we ripped the shit out of each other. But everybody got the same. You know, it was dark. It was very dark humor, very very dark.
We just spoke about humor being used as a kind of a coping mechanism to kind of put plasters on maybe like a mental or emotional wound. You mentioned about the writing. Did you find that did you find writing to be like therapeutic in some way?
For me, I only realized after I'd finished writing the book that what I was creating was a mythical section, a mythical police station where I got familiar with the characters and I could nearly engage in my own life through the writing. I didn't start off writing for that reason, but there were definitely happy days in the place, and there were definitely really happy memories with colleagues, great laughs. And in writing, you could nearly semi recreate some of those emotions again that have long since passed. So for me, I find it very therapeutic. And when you write about a character who slowly takes life, a colleague character in the book or thriller or a sergeant or whatever, you become familiar with them. Then you're writing the second book, it's nearly like re-engaging with these characters again, and I find it very helpful and good fun.
Is it I realize I'm asking you these questions, but like, is it difficult on some level to talk about the more traumatic days, like the Ballygawley bus clean up and other things we described? Is it does it kind of dredge up emotions from the time, even talking about it now?
Yeah, I find when you and I first took it up and you sort of sent me samples of things you might want to discuss with me, that first of all I panicked because I didn't realize it happened so long ago. And some of these incidences where I can still remember the incident, but I can't remember the date. If you know what I mean.
Oh, that's
those
great.
sort of things. And I'm trying to nail down certain things, but you do find it very draining because it's taking you somewhere which wasn't pleasant, which you've been trying to run away from, you know, since then. But I also think it's important maybe that folks that weren't there, maybe even if you aren't on the side of police, appreciate the perspective of individuals that were there doing a job, who had that job thrust upon them, as it were, to go to Ballygawley, to go to those riots, to go to those bomb explosions, those murders, those picking up bits of human, you know, and how we felt and how we had to come into work the next day and go out and a beat in the Woodstock Road or deal with a road traffic accident, you know, and the Craiger Road, or go to a domestic the next day, or a sudden death of an old age pensioner, or from one extreme to the other. So yeah, but it's been good. It's all been good.
On what you just said, yeah, I think what one of the goals of this channel or podcast or whatever is to kind of bring out the stories of those who were there, and the reason being, like, whether you're completely anti-RUC or completely pro or something.
And I respect everybody's opinion, because you're a product of your where you've come from. I'm where I'm from. You're where you're from, John, and just we're all in each other's. We're still living on the same planet.
I was going to say, like whatever perspective you come from, every single person, be it IRA or UVF or RUC or Army, every single person whether they were a good person or bad person or kind of in between, they were all a human being with human psychology and thoughts and feelings, just like you and me have. And I think it's important to hear,
to learn off each other,
and even just to go back in history. Look, we're very lucky that we're in a time when I can speak to someone who was around during this very historically significant period. Don't even have to be in a room, but I'm going to speak to them through a laptop. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to get the thoughts and feelings of those who were there, whether the particular audience member might hate them or love them.
It's for me as well, John. The thing that I'm really trying to drive home and everything I do, well, the days I have left or the years I have left, is somebody can say, well, the police didn't do the Marley funeral very well. That's desperate. So the police are forever bad, or police didn't do the Protestant parade very well. The police are always bad. But we had to do it every day. And when we weren't at the Marley funeral, when we weren't at the Orange Parade, we were dealing with bomb scares, we were dealing with murders, 3 a day or 3 a week in the province, and still having to do ordinary inverted commas police work, and having to try and live our lives. And those days you were doing 100 hours a month overtime. If you're working 40 hours a week, what are you actually working? You're doing 12-hour shifts practically every time you're going into work, and it's exhausting. And all I'm saying is, put on the uniform and do the hours that I did or that my friends did, then come back and tell me how you feel. Because it wasn't easy.
Can you take me towards the end of your time? You were posted, you said, in MOUNTPOTTINGER station, and you described it as your most nerve-wracking, actually.
Yep. When the first ceasefire ended, I'd been in an area crime team before then. The first ceasefire happened, and then I became part of a plainclothes unit, which was good fun. But when it ended, I think it was 1996, I became a pixie. And a pixie was an officer who was stationed in MOUNTPOTTINGER. We also had pixies in Musgrave Street, which dealt solely with the short strand.
I was going to say, why the name Pixie? Where'd that come from?
I have no idea, but it was like a badge of honor to be a pixie, because it was probably the worst job I've ever done in my life. So MOUNTPOTTINGER had normal policing uniform officers. They had neighbour officers, and then there was the pixies, and our job was to keep the lines of roadways and stuff going in and out of MOUNTPOTTINGER station safe for other officers to do. So you're continuously going up and down Beachfield Street, Madrid Street, MOUNTPOTTINGER Road, doing beats around the short strand with the army, which was sometimes good fun, sometimes not good fun. In order that MOUNTPOTTINGER's police station could exist safely, and somewhere I read that it was the most attacked police station in the world. It was a very dangerous place to be. Civilian staff, the cleaners, the cooks, canteen staff, all had to be ferried in by Land Rover from Knocknagonie Police Station or Garnerville Police Station in Land Rover. And the pixies had to be out on the road for them every morning, every evening every morning coming in, every evening going home. And during the rest of the day, you're patrolling around Short Strand. And that, for me, I found very exhausting emotionally, because I'd done about 15 years. All the stuff we've talked about before probably was behind me then. And you had a partner in the Pixies, and you and your partner would take the army out. And the army units came in, I think, every 3 months. Some were good, some were less good with regards to playing the game, not winding up the locals. They were in for 3 months. They were in for 3 months, and some of them wanted to do something about it, and you were having to get them to wind their neck in. And they would be on for 24 hours a day. And if you got the wrong end of them, you would be getting a brickload of soldiers who'd been on for 20 hours and they were absolutely daffy duck. And you would have to go out patrolling with them. And that was dangerous, that was scary. And for me as a police officer then, I had my life, my partner's life on ice, as well as exhausted soldiers. And it got to a stage where my nerves were in shreds. I'd be lying in bed at night, absolutely, because every day was the same. There was 2 ways in Mount Pottinger police station, through the front gates or through a little back gate, and both of these areas were covered by the natives. They had eyes on. So every time, and your patrolling area in Mount Pottinger was about half a mile square of 100% nationalist, anti-RUC, anti-police walking area, and you're walking around there with your soldiers, and it just ground you down. You weren't going into this nice sunny field in Cookstown to get lost, 140 square miles. You were walking that beat. You're worrying about keeping the punters safe coming in and out of the station. And one day, a really strange thing happened with me. I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown lying in bed this night. I was, really, really, really stressed out about the next day's work. And I woke up the next morning and I was flat calm. Not flat numb, flat calm. And it was as if my body had said, I have done everything I can to give you a nervous breakdown. I give up. And I went into work, and from that moment on till I finished my time with the Pixies, I never was scared again. I wasn't a zombie, John. I was just flat calm. My body ran out of anxiety. It ran out of fear. I love some psychiatrists say, well, what exactly happened with you then? It was to be at such a height of tension and anxiety to nothing overnight. I don't know.
Yeah, wow, that sounds it almost does sound like your body just stopped.
Stopped. It's just I can't do this. I can't make you your flight, or what is it, flight or flee or flee or flight. I'm trying to
Fight or flight. Yeah.
I'm trying to get you to. This is so dangerous. This is gone.
I meant to ask this earlier, but I forgot. On the note of the soldiers, some of them, I'm sure most weren't like this, but a significant portion of them, and probably depending a bit on like the actual kind of unit they were in, but some of them were absolute fucking animals. They were psychopaths. They had just been through. If you want to read it, where one of my best interviews is with a fellow named Harry McCallion, who was a para and SAS, and in his book Killing Zone, which is brilliant, he went in detail about like the way the soldiers would treat each other on the base. They were incredible bullies. They're absolute fucking lunatics. Some of them, they had just gone through this basically like brainwashing boot camp where they would chant things like for the right to kill we must suffer. So they're building themselves up to a kill. They're like, this is a process. It's a brutalizing process. Did that like show itself in some of the soldiers?
Whenever a different army unit arrived in Mount Pottinger, in my time, before they set foot outside in the ground, you got their little lieutenant or whoever it was. You gave them all a very, very. Can you hear me? No. Yes. You give them a very, very strict talking to with regards what you expected of them. And the last thing you wanted was for them to wind up the natives, because you're making a mess for the next crew coming after you. I wanted to keep everybody alive, wanted to do our patrols or VCPs or people stops professionally. Some units were amazing. Other units, you just had to keep the leash on them. And I'm not going to tell you which were good and which weren't.
Fair enough, no worries. What's I going to say to you? Was there like different types, like the type of fella who would be in the army on average versus the type that would be in the police?
Definitely, yeah. Not that I'm saying that they were a different beast. I just feel that the guy that was in the police was probably able to act probably better on his own initiative. Whereas there's the army mode: you will do this, you will not do that, and don't think for yourself. Just do as you're told, sort of style. I'm sorry if there's any army out there. Maybe I'm talking crap, but I just think that maybe it's a case, folks, that I'd been there for 15, 16, 17 years, and I'd done the run so many times, done the beats, done the patrols, that maybe I just knew slightly more than the guy coming in for 3 months.
That's a very
how to stay alive.
Very good point as well, which has been pointed out to me before, that like obviously soldiers, they're only here for like a set amount of time and then they're gone. They're not part of the community. They don't have a house, and parents and grandparents and cousins that people can easily find out about in a in a relatively small place. You can't get doorstepped as RUC officers sometimes would. You can't get doorstepped if you live in an army barracks. So yeah, they had in a way they had not in a way, they were a lot safer in many ways. Yeah. Okay, actually on that note, did you ever find out about specific threats on your life
Yes.
during your career? Where it was you specifically being targeted?
Yeah. Now this was when I was in the crime team, living in East Belfast. A threat came through on me, and the powers that be decided that we'll keep an eye on it. And the guy that told me that they were keeping an eye on it, I would have trusted with my life, and nothing happened.
Did you receive any more detail as to like why? What was just the case that you got identified, or was it something in particular? Were you being a
it was from the prod side.
Was it?
Yeah. Maybe it was to do with when I was in the crime team, where we were basically dealing with a lot of the Protestant issues of the loyalist, drugs and stolen goods and all that jazz.
What year are we talking?
Pardon me?
What year would we be talking about, roughly?
Crime team would have been 95, 90, 94, 94, 95 to 96. And that's when we did in that wee pocket, we did the £1 million drugs haul. But there was other things we were very successful at in East Belfast.
I'll ask about the £1 million one now in a minute. Being that you weren't in special branch, you're in the REC but not special branch. Would you, as that type of officer, have had any idea as to how penetrated the IRA or indeed the loyalists were from special branch? Would you
not a clue?
Even like a particular operation or like arrest that you might be making, would it be told that, okay, this information came from someone we have inside? Or
Go ahead. Would you just repeat that again? I didn't quite understand
for
that.
example,
Sorry.
That's grand. Let's just say you were going to do a raid on somewhere, an arrest or a stop or something, and that the information that led to that being possible was from an informant. Would you have been told, like, not even who it was, but that it came from a rat?
A tout? You mean information regarding, say, drugs from a source?
Yeah, or just like whatever you're about to do, like an arrest you're about to make or a stop you're about to make. If it's based on information, based on intel from a human source, would you at least know that? Would you at least have been told that, okay, this unit has an SB guy, an SB informant in it?
Um, yes, but you wouldn't have been told any more than that. And often, if you in a plain clothes time, you had an operation on, say, against you, you were a drug dealer or you were handling stolen goods or blah blah blah, and for whatever reason, you put in your application to do the arrest search in your house to SB, and they said no, that was it. You didn't do it. Didn't ask questions why, and they wouldn't tell you why. That was the way it worked. For the greater good, I think. Inverted commas.
Would I guess it wouldn't be you, it would be more, it'd be special branch and task and coordinating fellas, but like we'll say if like the FRU, the army had an informant in a unit that you were like investigating, would there have been like intel from them kind of passed down or anything like that, or some kind of working together?
There are the conduit would have been a special branch.
Would
That's
come,
it.
yeah, come to you.
Yeah. Special branch always. And you couldn't do anything without their say so.
Colin Breen and Stephen White both have stories about times that they were recognized off the job by people they had dealt with in a professional capacity, you know, like paramilitaries that they had investigated or interrogated or arrested or something like that. Do you have any stories like that?
No.
Really, none at all. Wow.
No. No. I'm delighted to say that. No. I'd love to say, oh, but no, I wouldn't love to say it. Thankfully, no. I had this philosophy on that when I put the uniform on, I generally like to wear the peak quite low over my face. I was softly spoken, didn't overly engage in eye contact with the punter. So I was giving him as little of me as possible. Whereas if I approach somebody like Deputy Dog, eyeballing him, winding him up, he's going to have more of a case to remember me, remember my voice. You know, I just felt try to be as grey as possible when you're dealing with dodgy people.
You might take us to that story you kind of referred to earlier. You believe I believe it was the first. Do you say the first £1 million drug seizure?
I believe it was the first million. I was in the crime team. The crime team evolved in the MOUNTPOTTINGER police station shortly after the first ceasefire, and it was created by guys who had an interest in criminal activity. Guys that had been in the area for quite some time, knew all the players, and its goal was tackle drugs, tackle thefts, tackle the burglars in East Belfast, try to create sources, and be a positive effect in East Belfast. And we were quite successful. And everything we did had to be submitted through special branch, through a crowd called Divisional Intelligence Unit. And if they said go, we went. If they said no, we didn't. And this day, it's a tale of two sources. Have you watched Blue Lights over in the States yet? No. It's a crime.
I've heard about it, but no.
Well, it's a crime program set in modern day policing in East Belfast, and the pub they use is actually the pub we were surveying in this first £1 million drug deal, called the Cock and Hens in Lord Street. And part of our wee outfit was a wee offshoot which dealt with drugs, and they had a source which said that on this specific date, this specific guy was calling at the Cock and Hens bar in East Belfast with drugs. When he left, we were to follow him away from the Cock and Hens bar and stop him and do a search of the Misuse of Drugs Act. We went, right, that's fine. Our crews were detailed, and me and a mate of mine were detailed as the stop vehicle. And there was no P looking over at the Cock and Hens. And come in and around the time this guy was supposed to appear, the drugs boy gets a phone call to say he's not coming. It's all been put off for another couple of hours. He's coming at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's 2 o'clock where I'm sitting in Paxton Street with my partner, uniform on. Well, that's it. Nothing's going on for another couple of hours. One of my other colleagues, Tooth's giving him desperate jip. He says to Sergeant, any chance I can get up to the dentist in Bangor? I'll be back inside 2 hours. For the rest of the show coming, and this guy turns up. Okay, off you go. So he slides off to Bangor. We're sitting umming and ahhing. What are we going to do for 2 hours? When a Rover car pulls up outside the Cock and Hens bar. Guy gets out. Disappears into the Cock and Hens. Next thing, he's coming out with black bin bags. So the guys that are waiting for the guy at 2 o'clock are looking at all this going on. Does the Victor check and the Rover vehicle check, sorry. Watches all this black bin bags going into this car. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? 2 hours to kill. Sure, we'll stop it. A wee bit away from the Cock and Hens as well. And we were also running a source which said that a lot of stolen to order stuff was being shifted in and out of the Cock and Hens. Okay, we were there on one source's information for drugs at 2 o'clock, but actually that was not going to happen until 4. We weren't there for the other guy's information, but we thought, let's just go check. So we stops the car about half a mile away in D Street, the D Street Bridge in East Belfast. And where he's heading for is up the carriageway back to Yards. Stopped him and checks his car full of black bin bags, carriage clock, 40 goods, shirts, wristwatches, all with shops and brands and prices on them, stolen to order. He's got all this stuff in his car. Arrests the guy. Very pleasant guy, by the way. Very pleasant. Suspicion of being in receipt of handling stolen goods, blah, blah, blah. Calls up a backup Land Rover. All the bags are placed in. Right, you're arrested, chump, blah, blah, blah. Come back to Mountpottinger Police Station. I go, bump, the boot. Bump. And the boot just goes, bump, the boot of his car. He says, don't worry about it, Constable. It's okay. It'll be fine. And I'm thinking, well, the natives of East Belfast will think this is Christmas Day if you leave your boot up on the D Street Bridge. Be away with it. I said, nah. But all our eyes are on these black bin bags with the stolen truck. We thought, nothing to do with drugs. We thought, this is it. Home run, brilliant. And I thought, no. We'll take your car back to Mountpottinger, sir. It's a much safer place to be in. So, sure, no, it's okay. Come on. Drives it back to Mounntpottinger. Oh, we're all delighted with ourselves. Look at this, carriage clocks, blah, blah, blah. Like, well, let's have a search at this car anyway. Checks another wee cruise out looking at the car. 2 black holdalls in the back. Unzips the holdalls, full of ecstasy. and ecstasy tabs. Where do you live? I live in sort of Newton Ards Road. Right, we'll have to do follow-up search in the house. And this is where it's bizarre because my mate, Big Stevie, he's getting a sore tooth seen in Bangor. So he's the man to get everything sorted out at Ards. Phones him up, gets an Ebony call signed as a search team for the address in Ards. The other guy's held for. And he goes, gets a warrant and stuff, and he goes for this address in Ards. And it's like a manor that Lord Bagshot lives in, like a stately manor. And Stevie goes, this doesn't look like the sort of place that there'd be ecstasy tablets coming out of. And he checks again on the address, and it turns out there's a Bangor Ards address and there's an Ards address. And he'd gone to the highfalutin end as opposed to the changed the warrant. And he arrives at this house, an executive house. And there's this little lady, attractive middle-aged lady, answers the door, cardigan on the walls. God is good and Jesus is fab. Are you Mrs. the wife of Sam? Your husband's just been arrested and she's stolen goods. Oh, terrible! That's terrible. Constable, we're thinking, or Stevie's thinking, oh, what's going on here? I have to search your house, madam, for drugs. Feel free, officer. And the guys are looking around this lady's house, and she has jam jars, electric, gas, Christmas presents, holiday. Every jam jar has wines and Stevie's thing. And he's just arrested a guy with a car full of ecstasy tablets, and she's a little Christian woman. And he says, well, has he got anywhere else? He's got keys of or control, Mrs. X, Y, and Z. Yes, he's a garage. Do you want the keys? There it is down there. Keys to the garage. Opens the garage up. Long story short, the rest of the drugs sitting in there, black hole. While she's saving for every penny for holidays and Christmas and electricity, her husband's out driving a taxi, playing on the side as well, doing a bit of drugs, looking after £1 million worth of ease for his employer. It was, but for a dodgy boot, John, but for a source that cancelled for 2 hours, that wouldn't have happened.
In terms of physical space, what is £1 million worth of ecstasy looks like? Given ecstasy is relatively cheap, like per pill. Like
flipping, I have no idea, because I seen the 2 holdalls in the car he had. I think it was a Rover. I don't know how many holdalls, but the powers that be that seized all the stuff said it was £1 million, and it was the first £1 million drugs seizure in the province. And as I said, it wouldn't have happened, but for a dodgy boot. When you think about it, he's left E-tabs and 2 holdalls, and he was quite prepared to leave that. What
was I going to say? My perception is that like anywhere in kind of the north, but especially like a place like Belfast, that if that various paramilitaries, depending on the area, be it loyalist or Republican, would kind of have the area kind of sewn up to a degree, and that if anyone wants to go about dealing drugs on any kind of a scale that would would make it like a little bit prolific, even, that they would have to have permission from these paramilitaries, otherwise you're getting kneecapped if you're lucky. And maybe
yeah.
Would that perception be correct, that like if you're dealing drugs in an area, you by definition you kind of have to have the
unless you're very low level, you needed permission to deal drugs in East Belfast. And now, if you ask me to tell the truth, I can't remember who was more prolific, whether it was UDA or UBF, whether they were both at it, one more than the other. I can't recall which was the main player. But you wouldn't be doing it off your own bat.
Sure. Sure. Okay, so we'll wrap up soon enough. I appreciate all the time you spent, everything you shared. Given that you were around into like the PSNI days,
Hmm.
what was policing post Good Friday Belfast like? If indeed you were stationed there.
Are you talking about when the RUC was stood down and the PSNI took over? What was the difference between both police organisations? Is that what you're asking, John? Or
I suppose more about the place. I'd have to imagine that after the Good Friday, it was obviously the paramilitaries and stuff were still around, but like as a
Mhm.
police officer, I'd have to imagine you could focus more on like the normal type crime as opposed to dealing with like paramilitaries that police in
Yeah,
other countries wouldn't even have to conceive of.
yeah. Well, I think really you're talking logistics here because when the troubles ended, lots of other things ended. The need to have a police force of 13,000 ended. The UDR ended. Northern Ireland is the size of Essex.
Right, it's like
Uh,
it's for
it's the
America.
size of Essex. So it went from 13,000, and then the Royal Irish were disbanded. The full-time reserve went, and now the police service are running. Is it 3 or 4 thousand? From 13,000 to 3 or 4 thousand, and you started seeing the gaps. You know what you used to be able to achieve and attain wasn't quite there. So the guys or the girls coming through were every bit as good as the guys and girls that I ever worked with. There's no difference apart from the uniform change, but it was a different product entirely. Probably more suited to the day, the peaceful times, and my time.
Uh,
But on it, I suppose, and what I'm saying is, I don't know if you remember the Bobby Story funeral, the COVID thing. Did that get to you in the States?
oh yeah, yeah. The
The,
part that
he,
the part that I kind of heard about it was like certain politicians having to like getting into trouble for you know
for
for saying something nice. But yeah, they're kind of
it was the fact that Bobby Story was an IRA man, um, and when he died, he was getting buried up at, I think it was Roselawn, the one up the Ballygawley Road anyway, and the Shinners decided to have a normal, bit of a paramilitary style funeral for him. And I'm thinking, sitting watching this on TV, and thinking, the police didn't really have the resources to say no anymore to all that, for the training. And it went ahead. And then you're thinking, so what's the damage done? And now you're having these, what are those things, drones flying in the air in Derry. So the policing is now being done by drones, whereas when police officers used to have to go out in the ground, they were getting attacked. Now drones are sort of, who can we attack? There's no police about for us to attack. There's a drone keeping an eye on the situation. It's all changing, hopefully for the good.
I was talking. I think it was Jonathan Trigg I was talking to about. Sorry, I was talking to funny enough a fella who was involved in some kind of Republican group, but more kind of like post Good Friday. And one of the things we were talking about, this isn't an episode, it was just a phone call. We were talking about like if the conflict happened today, how different it would be, and one of the big differences being technology. You could like a lot
Mm,
of the kind of countryside no-go areas that could be
mm,
solved if you
mm,
have military grade drones and a bunch of fellas who behind the scenes somewhere can control them. It would make things significantly more difficult for the Republicans. Even he was describing that the MI5 had like hidden cameras that were literally like a screw you could just like take a bolt out and put it in. Technology would make such a difference if it happened today.
I witnessed some of that years ago where there was a camera in North Queen Street, an army camera in North Queen Street. This maybe means nothing to you, but it's a brave bit away from the Odyssey over in East Belfast. And I was looking at this camera in this army area, and the camera could fix on a badge and read the writing on the badge. It's something had to have been a mile away. And I'm going, that there. Now I was still working, so I'm retired 12 years. That was in place 12 years ago. And that's the technology that was there. And maybe we didn't know it was there for a good bit of time, but amazing. But you just wonder. Hopefully, we'll all get a bit of peace and get on with each other's dreams and hopes and stuff like that. There, my point to you, and I didn't mean to be annoying about the Bobby Story funeral, was what if the resources had have been there to deal with, to say no to the Story funeral going ahead, would it have gone ahead? You know, if the resources had have been there, because there's now a lot of too much sometimes talking and not enough action. You know, but who's right? Hey, who's right, folks? I don't know. You know.
I get you. Again, now, everything you shared, I appreciate it greatly. Just as one final thing, like if you could go back and talk to the young you who was about to sign up for the RUC, would you tell him, look, you know, I appreciate your motivation and you will save lives by doing this work and help loads of people, but the toll it takes and you couldn't have known it. Would you now tell a young you to go pick a different job?
No, because from day one I wanted to make a difference, John, and I know I did make a difference. I've saved lives directly. I've gone into burning buildings. Yes, I've been shot at. I've been blown up a couple of times. I've been different. I've been decent with decent people, and I do know I've made a difference. So I'm glad I did what I did. It did take its toll on me, but I have no regrets. And I've worked with great people.
Thank you so much. Now, I always say to everyone at the end, was there anything that you wanted to mention to the audience that we didn't get into, or just anything, just kind of any perceptions that you think people have that you might want to correct or anything like that?
No, just if I've offended or upset anybody, I apologize. I'm not a political beast. I don't vote. I hope I've brought you into a bit of the flavour of what I've been through. And if you had been me, would you have done things any differently? Would you have coped any better than me or my friends? Could you have coped with the loss? You've done anything any differently? And that's all. You know, try walking a mile in my shoes. But I respect everybody's story as well.
Very good. I'm looking forward to reading Mountroyal, the book on the left side of the viewer's screen, and anything else. I believe you have written a second, right?
Yeah, Mountroyal Pearls. It's a sequel to Mountroyal, and it's really much the same. It's got very good pre-reviews, but Mountroyal's still out there, folks, for sale. Check it out in Goodreads or Amazon. Read the blurb on it. If it's your cup of tea, enjoy, and leave me a comment if you want. Always like nice comment. John, thank you very much.
No,
it's been a pleasure, sir.
Thank you very much.
I really admire what you're doing.
Really, thank you.
Because you're going everywhere. You're not being one-eyed. You're going everywhere, and you're right to. We've got to learn for our children's sake.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It would be the height of tragedy if like another sectarian based conflict or smaller conflicts came about after this. There's been way more than enough, you know.
We have too much in common. Our traditions have too much in common. When Ireland play, I'm down at the Aviva Yahooing for them, and everybody likes to beat England, don't they? So, and yet I have family at English family. But
it was funny actually. This was obviously before England beat Netherlands and lost to Spain, but there was this meme going around Twitter of a fella with his face like that, and it says Republicans when they realize they have to cheer for the orange team to knock England out.
true. Excellent.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Again, everything you've shared, I've kept you nearly 3 hours, which I greatly appreciate. I'm sure the audience does too.
Okay, folks,
Thanks
stay safe.